Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the briefing room. My name is Eric Cavanaugh. I will be your moderator for today's webcast, in which we're going to talk about one of the hottest topics out there these days in the world of managing information assets. The title is Analytic Democracy, Spreading the Wealth of Insights. So we're going to be talking about data discovery through visualization techniques. Now, there is some question as to where a dashboard ends and data exploration via visual discovery begins. We'll probably talk a bit about that. Here's a slide about yours truly and enough about me. As the mission, I think as many of you know, of the briefing room is to reveal the essential characteristics of enterprise software. We're really trying to help our audience understand what these tools do, how they work, why they're designed a certain way. And so what we do is we bring vendors into the briefing room and we hire analysts to come in and take briefings from them. This is a live analyst briefing that you're going to hear. One of the curveballs that we have in terms of format is that the analyst and vendor do not coordinate before the show. And the point there is we want the analyst to ask the kinds of questions that they would normally ask in a regular briefing. So what you're going to see here after a presentation is a live analyst briefing between Tableau Software and Cindi Howson of BI Scorecard, who is one of the most well-known analysts in the field of business intelligence and, of course, also this whole world of data visualization, data discovery, dashboard design, so on and so forth. So we cover a different topic every month. August is analytics. It's a hot topic, folks. It's one of the hottest topics out there, quite frankly, and why wouldn't it be? The whole purpose of managing all these information assets is to glean some insights such that you can then turn around and persuade people to do something. So you probably saw in some of our marketing out there, we talked about the importance of being able to effectively communicate what you're trying to tell someone, and a visualization can be a very effective means for doing that. So all the insights that you get as a persuasive person in your organization might not mean too much unless your persuasion results in someone taking action. Obviously, there are certain actions that you can take, but when you need to get somebody else on board, that's where a lot of this data visualization stuff can come in really handy because, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we're going to be talking today about how visual discovery and visual analysis and demonstration can help you out there, whether with your coworkers or with partners or whoever it is you're trying to persuade. Maybe even you're in the government space and you're trying to explain something to a commission or a board. Regardless of your intention, the point is that these visualization technologies can be very effective for demonstrating what simple words maybe not so well empowered to do. So our analyst, as I mentioned, is Cindi Howson. She's the founder of BI Scorecard. You can look her up online. It's a very useful tool. She's been covering the space for a number of years and has a very critical eye for what is happening. She just published an article on our website, InsightAnalysis.com, that has some really good insights about what's happening in this field of discovery and data visualization. Of course, what goes around comes around, and we do see these patterns as they emerge, and then they come back, and you know, sometimes what's old is new again. But I think it's safe to say there is a lot of new stuff happening out there these days, in addition to big data, of course, which is the hottest topic of all. And for those of you who are interested in big data, just go into our archives at InsightAnalysis.com under Webcast, and you can see Big Blue, IBM, was in the briefing room 2 weeks ago. We actually took a week off last week, and that was a well-received rest, I'll say. So Tableau software is very interesting stuff. It's been around, at least that I've been following it, since 2005. In fact, it was at the San Diego TDWI conference in 2005 when I watched it being demonstrated and was very impressed way back then with the ease of use and the whole drag and drop metaphor for data visualization, which I would argue is very powerful stuff. One of the things we often talk about in analytics, especially in data visualization, but also just in any kind of analysis, is you want to have this rapid-fire relationship or conversation, as some people will say, with your data, because if you have to wait too long to see how some new set of data changes the picture, well, you kind of lose your train of thought and maybe you go in some other direction. So it's very good to be able to quickly mix and match data sets to see what the relationships are between these different groups of data and then get hopefully some insights. So we're going to hear from Brett Sheppard today and Suzanne Hoffman as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand the keys to the WebEx car over to Brett and Suzanne, and you all can take it away from here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. This is Suzanne Hoffman with Tableau Software. And we are delighted to be here in the briefing room with you and Cindy. Just to give you a background a little bit on who Tableau Software is, as Eric mentioned, he saw us as early as 2005. Well, we actually came out of the visualization lab at Stanford University in 2003. The three gentlemen who you see, Christian Chabot on the left, Dr. Chris Stolte in the middle, and Pat Hanrahan on the right, are the three founders and existing members of our executive team here at Tableau. The interesting thing about Tableau is we're one of the only software companies that I know of that actually has Academy Awards and patents for the software that we've developed. Pat Hanrahan is an early founder of Pixar Studios, and his package RenderMan that he developed is responsible for making Woody from Toy Story look alive, as opposed to the flip frames that Disney used to use to automate some of the animation that they had in their studios. Pat came out of Pixar, went back to Stanford to academia, teamed with Chris Stolte, and earned a DARPA grant that basically said, what can you do with the technology you've developed, gentlemen, and how can businesses best make use of it? So with that, they founded VizQL, which is the underlying software that was from RenderMan and also is for Tableau software. Teamed with Christian, and they brought it to the market in 2004, and I think the rest is sort of history. We're cash flow positive. We've been so for a while. We've done, over the past couple of quarters, about $58 million in revenue, and we've got global representation with the software, and we've been called the fastest growing business intelligence software company. So, but our mission statement hasn't changed from that early days that Eric remarks on how easy the software was to use. We very simply want to help people see and understand their data. We're an enabling technology, and we really want people to be as close to the data as they possibly can get, to be able to create meaningful patterns, understand meaningful patterns in their data, and see how their data is shaping the business decisions that they need. The technology moves out of the way of the individuals using it. It's a very simple paradigm. We have two products. It's Tableau Desktop, which is your author mode, where you explore and visualize the data, and it's really self-service. We enable the concept of pervasive BI to get away from just the top tier of users being able to use the data and interact with their data, and being able to push the data analytics and the capacity to be introspective with your data down to a much lower level within organizations, even to the point where we can reach into 50% and lower in the organization. I like to talk about from the shop floor to the top floor in users of the technology to be able to interact with their data and have that blazingly fast against up to zettabytes of data as we've got with big data these days. So the desktop, again, is the authorship mode, allowing you to collaborate and share as the Tableau server. It gives you a fully integrated business intelligence systems, allows you to do a web deployment of your dashboards in a completely secure environment, and manage enterprise scalability. We have companies that have 4,000 or 5,000 users going against their Tableau server. We're predominant. We coexist with all the other BI technologies in the world. We don't intend to replace all of them. There's facets of our technology that are not appropriate for enterprise deployment with in comparison to some of the big ones. So we don't do, for example, full enterprise reporting. We're about data visualization. We're about dashboarding. We're about handing the users interactive capability with their data. And as I said, we go against big data, but we go against small files as well. So you have people who are in a standalone environment that are going against their local spreadsheets and local files all the way up to large data deployments with Hadoop, with Teradata, with Netezza, MapR, any kind of what we would call big data, and everything in between. We play very nicely with the database analytics vendors because we don't remove the data from the source. We do a live connection back to the data, and that's actually well received by IT and the business users alike, in that we don't create separate silos of information. So again, you can choose to go against that live data connection, or because one of the issues today is, you know, if I want to do a lot of joins, if I really have a federated view of my data, I can in fact bring it into Tableau. We do have the capability to do an in-memory data store, a columnar store that accelerates any kind of slow data access, or an offline mode for data access as well. And it's a choice by the user. From a mobile perspective, Tableau is completely enabled to give you an environment in the iPad or Android environments that's a native deployment. It gives you the interface that you need. I don't think we're going to show that here today, but if anybody wants to see that, welcome to give us a shout afterwards, or go up to our website to see what we do in the mobile environment as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Brett Sheppard to talk a little bit about the architecture and then to dive into a demo.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suzanne. And so this shows the Tableau architecture of our two products of Tableau Desktop and Tableau Server. Suzanne mentioned BizQL that emerged from Stanford University, and our co-founders worked there. We have, built into Tableau a data server and an application server. These are really not something that most of our users even are aware that exists. So in fact, unless we're on a call like this one, many times people start with Tableau Desktop and benefit from this architecture, but it's not something that is required to get going. But for those who are interested in the architecture, that we support the clients from desktop to browser to mobile, including, as Suzanne mentioned, the native apps for iPad and Android, that it's a highly scalable technology that can go from one person using on a desktop to thousands of people across a company or across a public sector organization. And as you'll see in this demo, we connect to data where it lives today in a variety of both relational databases, columnar to unstructured data as well. And with that, I'm going to switch over and pull up Tableau Desktop and also go into our screen share mode. So just a second as we're showing the desktop. And you'll now see Tableau Desktop. I'm going to show you in this demo three things. One is connecting to data, the second is viewing it, and the third is sharing it. And I'm going to start by connecting to data. That, as you see on the left-hand side, are a variety of database formats. You also see on our screen here some of our internal tracking, where our system called Alpo, where you can look at your data, including we try to be fit. So in addition to sales tracking, we have our fitness challenge. But more so for this audience, you're probably interested in how we connect to files and databases. So as you'll see on the left-hand side, the first thing I'm going to connect to is a Tableau data extract, and then I'm going to come back to connect to a second data source. But I also want to highlight the range of database connections, that we work with what you have today. And if you're a customer such as eBay, for example, that has a relatively centralized architecture, we connect to eBay's Teradata system and to Hadoop. with a partner software with Cloudera, and we just announced software with another Hadoop partner, MapR. If you're a decentralized organization, such as our customer T-Mobile USA, where they have some MySQL, they have some Oracle, they have a Teradata system, they use Splunk for gathering data logs, they use Informatica for data integration. We support a variety of customized direct connectors and also have a general ODBC driver. So if it's a technology like T-Mobile USA for Splunk or Informatica, if you don't see listed on here, we support through ODBC. And we are continually announcing new data connectors. In fact, we no longer group these with our annual launches. So this is Tableau 7 I'm showing you now, because we take a Switzerland approach to connecting to data, and every few months you will see new data connectors from us. So I'm going to start by connecting to a Tableau data extract, which is a database extract. In this case, I'm going to show county health data, and I'm going to open this. I'll keep the same naming. And what you see here on the upper left-hand side, you'll see that I've connected to this data. And in this case, this is an extract that we pulled from the database. I'm also going to show you now a live connection. So I'm going to go to Data, connect to Data. And in this case, I'm going to connect to Excel. So this may be a shared Excel file, for example, that's on a SharePoint server that different colleagues are using. Whenever there's an update to this Excel file, it's automatically updated within Tableau. So I'm going to connect here to healthcare spend by county. And there's a variety of things that we could do here if we wanted to in terms of doing table joins. In this case, I'm just going to connect to this as a single table. And I'm going to connect live. You'll now see two data connections here at the top. This list can go on. And so I'm just going, for this short demo, show connecting to two data sources. In addition to one primary data connection, you can have as many secondary data sources as you'd like. Of course, there are some constraints. If you're like T-Mobile USA, you don't want to connect to all of your individual log files this way. So you might do an extract, in their case, from Splunk, and connect to that. But from a practical standpoint, we have analysts and really any knowledge worker who are blending data from a variety of sources. So I'm going to start here by the healthcare spend and looking at our data sets. I'm a recent resident of Washington State, and I'm kind of interested in knowing what Washington State is like, what life is like here in Seattle. And I'm going to start by pulling out data by state and county. And you'll notice I'm going to double-click on state, and it pre-populates across the United States. And you'll see here that we have data in this set by each of the 50 states. And what's really intriguing about Tableau is I just double-click, and the Tableau software recognized that this data set applies to a geography, in this case to 50 states. The same would apply if this was data by country. I just, for example, was visiting a customer named IHS. They have Jane's Defense is one of their business units that was showing a similar map with Syria, tracking the opposition movement in Syria, where they connect to the data, double-click or drag and drop, and it automatically within the software recognizes the geography and shows a map. And I'm also going to click now on county. And so you see here that we have data, and I'm going to adjust the size a bit, broken out by a variety of counties. So I mentioned I just moved to Washington State, and it'd be interesting for me to see, what are things like people graduation rates, employment, people on healthcare in Washington State. So I'm going to do a filter. So on the Analysis tab, I'm going to go down to Quick Filter, and I'm going to filter here by state. And you notice on the right-hand side, it gives me this state filter. I'm going to take the all off and highlight just Washington State. You'll notice that the map is redrawn. You don't have to be a graphics person to use Tableau. This map is built into the software, and you notice here that I have data in this set from the different counties. So that's, begins to get interesting, but let's look at the data. So a lot of discussion with an election year on unemployment rates. So I'm going to double-click unemployment, and you begin to see here that are by size of circle, the unemployment rate. That's one way to look at it. What about if I take unemployment and put it under color? This gets even more interesting visually, and you can start to look at outliers. That as a new resident in Washington State, it's curious to me how here are adjacent counties where the County of Whitman has 5% unemployment, and here we have, showing that our county, let's say, while I've got some other counties here, like Stevens near the Canadian border, is 13%. That's kind of interesting. So let's say I want to look at the underlying data. Just click on Tableau. The little icon there shows the county. If I want to, go to the underlying data tab, and it shows me greater details about our data set. I'm going to turn that off, going back to our visualization view of, let's say we want to begin to compare data sets. So what I've shown here is unemployment. There's perhaps some relationships between the number of people who are unemployed and those who are uninsured. So that I'm going to pull up, using drag and drop, the uninsured to the label tab. And I'm going to increase the size a bit so you can see the figures. And this is one visual representation. So I've shown the state of Washington broken out by county. And interesting that our state over here, or county, that has 5% unemployment has 28% of people who are uninsured. That's kind of interesting because going back to our map, here's another state that has a larger number of people who have health care insurance, but they have a higher rate of unemployment. So, it's interesting in looking at this data set as a resident of Washington State. If I worked for a state government agency, this could help me in deciding how to allocate my budget dollars, or for a company looking where to put an office. And this, is one visual representation. What I'm going to do for our demo is take this tab, and I'm going to duplicate this sheet. You'll notice that these at the bottom are tabs that look quite similar to Microsoft Excel or other spreadsheet software, and that's intentional. This is designed for any knowledge worker, and it has a very intuitive interface, so that in this case, like I would in an Excel sheet, I've created a second tab. Another thing that I'd like to do now is, this is kind of one way to look at it, but what if I want to break this data out further, find different patterns here? I'm going to click now on the Show Me tab, and this is a great feature of Tableau that it doesn't have all of our visualization types, but it's got quite a few that are shown here, and it highlights for us which ones with the data that I've already shown that I can have a different type of visual representation. So I'm going to click here for scatter plot. So what this now shows us is the percent uninsured, the percent unemployed, and each of these is a county. And I can click on this if I want to get data about the individual county. what about some of the other information here of, you know, I try to be in good health. Suzanne is in fantastic health. What about
But it's not plugged in, so it's on red batteries. I can't call you back, and I'm on the other phone.
Hey, so we got some background noise there, folks, so watch out for that. Go ahead.
And so I'm interested in people who are, you know, in good health. And so I'm going to drag and drop this in so that I'm going to put this on size. And you now notice that the circle size has changed. Another thing I'm interested in is, what about smokers? You know, is there a relationship to people who are uninsured or unemployed? Are they less likely to be smokers, more likely? Oh, let's take a look. So let's take the smokers and put it on our label tab. And now I've combined several different elements. We're looking at uninsured, unemployed, and our data for smokers. And you can begin to see some patterns here, although there also are some outliers that we have, in this case, a county where it has smaller percent of smokers, but it's a relatively, you know, similar percent of unemployed. And this visual representation, you'll notice that we built from the original data source within just a few minutes. And I've not even touched the keyboard yet. Everything that I've done so far, I've used just using drag and drop with a mouse. And there's some other things where you can add here. If, for example, want to look at people who have graduated from high school, we can put this on the color tab. I'm going to make the colors a little bit easier to see so that, in this case, instead of using just green, I'm going to click down to, let's take our orange tab, and so that gives a little bit wider color range. And now you can begin to see that here's a county that has a different, you know, high school graduation rate compared to other counties that have very similar data characteristics. And so this is a potential outlier that if I was looking at this from a state that I might be interested in more data for. So lastly, I mentioned that in this demo I would show you three things. We connected to data, we visualized data, now we're going to share it. So I'd like to share this with some colleagues who also live here in Seattle, who might find this interesting. Going to go up to Server. And this is the second product that Suzanne mentioned in our architecture. Server enables you in a secure way to share, whether it's to people in your organization or people externally. And within Server, you can define role and group-based security. And we have customers who range from newspapers who publish, such as Washington Post and Guardian in the UK, who use Server to publish for things on the World Wide Web. We also have some customers in the intelligence community in Washington, D.C., who publish just within their, you know, analysts working with classified data, and every step in between, whether it's publishing for a work group or organization-wide or externally. So what I'm going to do now is click Publish Work Group, and it's asking me which sheets that I want to publish. I'm going to click both of these. I'm going to click Yes. And what this is doing now is sending this data to Tableau Server. And while this is coming up, here we go. And what I'm going to do now is show you the ability to have this data as a dashboard within Tableau Server. And so we have this now, so you'll notice that this is on the Tableau website. We have this workbook that I can click. We'll see it live on our website, and you have interactivity. So this is on the web browser page. I can still click on this. I can look at the underlying data. If I wanted to, I could, say I'm interested in all states. We can look at the same data sets nationwide. And other kind of interesting things to look at is, again, there are security controls for that you can disable it, but if you are sharing this within colleagues behind your firewall, you can go down and look at individual data and wanted to look at this as rows in a file. Likewise, I've just shown you one publishing method. You can export to a PowerPoint. You can we have customers, for example, that export to Adobe Illustrator, make it look, pixel perfect, and publish it, such as a newspaper. Or I mentioned Jane's Defense, that publishes data on the Syria opposition movement. To wrap up, what we've shown now within this live demo is the ability to connect to a variety of data sources, whether it's traditional files, traditional relational databases, newer data types like Hadoop, to then be able to visualize that data, learn some interesting things, and be able to share that on a web dashboard. What we're not showing you today, but you're welcome to see examples on our website, is this could also visualize either on a web browser on an iPad or Android device, or use our native apps for those two platforms. And with that, I'll turn things back to Eric.
All right, good demo. And let me see here. Let me try to hand back control. Why don't you pass me control? That's going to be the easiest thing if you can do that right now. Actually, I got it. Never mind. Here we go. All right, yes. Okay, good. So let me hand over control to Cindi Howson. Let me dig up your first slide, Cindi. There it is right there, and I'll hand the keys to you. We have a bunch of great questions in the queue already, folks. Feel free to send them in any time, though. We'll have a good Q&A in about 20 minutes or so. With that, Cindi Howson, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brett and Suzanne, for that introduction and demonstration. So I could start, just asking questions about all that cool data you were showing us, Brett, but we'll come back to that. So what I'd like to do is start with a definition of this new market segment within the overall business intelligence space, because when I work with customers, I often find that they get confused. They'll say, well, Tableau does self-service. We already have self-service tools, or so we thought. Is this just doing the same thing but slightly different? And I do believe that it does warrant its own category, in the same way that when the iPad first came out, that warranted its own category of tablet computers. You really wouldn't compare it to a laptop per se, or a desktop computer. So my definition of visual data discovery is that it's a category of tools used to speed the time to insight. So there are specific features in terms of visualization, best practices in visual perception. So that little show me feature that Brett showed, where it's recommending the most appropriate chart types, and easy exploration, which was clearly demonstrated. Some of the big things about visual data discovery, though, is the agility and the self-service BI. And I think this is why this new category of tools has really reinvigorated the whole business intelligence space. This category of tools is growing faster than the overall BI market. In fact, there was one statistic from the analyst firm Gartner that is predicting this segment will grow 3 times faster than the rest of the overall BI market, which is growing at about 10%. And why is that? I think for sure visual appeal. So pretty pictures matter. It makes BI more engaging, but it's also about the ease of use and the freedom from IT. So all that user autonomy to not only access the data, but to explore the data, to ask questions iteratively without having to go back to IT, either to set up a new data source, to model a semantic layer, or to create a complicated query. Some other things that we're seeing with some of the vendors, but not necessarily across the industry is also the incorporation of social data. So mining some of the tweet streams, the blogs, Facebook data, and so on, converging with visual analysis. So some of the things that I think Brett took a nice example, a lot of what we have historically done in BI, it's answering the questions that we already know are there, the metrics that we know we need to be looking at, such as sales by customer this year versus last year, or maybe to expand on Brett's sample data, it would be what is the unemployment rate by state. So those are the questions that we know to ask, and visual data discovery is that below the surface, the hidden part of the iceberg. It's, well, gee, what's really driving it? Are there certain characteristics of customers with higher sales? Or in the sample that Brett showed, it's, does smoking matter? Does education matter? It's the things that we don't yet know to ask about. So visualization, because this market segment is so high growth and hot and exciting, vendors like to use this term to both confuse people but also to engage prospective buyers. So it drives me crazy when a vendor says, we're a visual data discovery vendor, and really what they're doing is just creating a chart. So anytime we have a new segment of tools, I think it's important to understand what are the capabilities that are distinct from what you already have. So every BI tool out there, I don't care if it's a production reporting tool or if it's that ad hoc web-based business query tool, they all create charts, but it may only be the common chart types, such as a bar, line, pie. Not too often, but some of them will have additional chart types like a map or a gauge. But the process to get to the data is you query, you get a tabular result set, and then you decide how am I going to represent that. So some of the differentiating characteristics from a visual data discovery vendor is that they support the less common chart types, things like a small multiple, a waterfall, a network, a heat or tree map, sparkline, tag cloud, the scatter plot, for example, that Brett showed. They also follow some of the best practices in visualization. So not really using pies when the size of the wedge is too similar for us to perceive the difference, or smart use of color. So being aware of 10% of the population being colorblind, not mixing red and green without applying texture, things like that. And then that single step query and visualize process, which Tableau nicely demonstrated. Highly interactive, and data can be mashed from multiple data sources. It could be a data warehouse, could be a data mart, or it could be a spreadsheet. So some of these tools may be personal analytic tools. There is a category of tools that do not create dashboards. They really are just used on the desktop. But then there's also a category where you're doing rapid prototyping, so you're exploring on the desktop, and then you're deploying via a web-based environment. So this rallying cry for self-service BI has been around for a long time, but I think for some companies it's new. They started out with kind of static BI, static reports. What I encourage customers to think about is that there is a continuum of capabilities. And what really varies is the degree that IT has to be involved. So in its most basic form, a very sophisticated power user who can write their own free-form SQL and explore data in Excel, that is one form of self-service BI. The category that I think it requires less skills, you don't have to know SQL, and there is some reusability, is this category of visual data discovery. So this could be a custom-built reporting application, or it could be a packaged software application. And then this last one, the ability just to view a report and tweak it. So the report is pre-authored and somebody just wants to sort or filter. We're seeing some of those capabilities. So the boxes on the right are better suited to more casual users. The boxes on the left require a degree of expertise both in the software and the data. So the trade-off is really how much what is the degree of analytic complexity, how much IT involvement is needed to set up the environment, and then the skills involved. So a fixed report, you really require IT to design those. Spreadsheets, a user can do it themselves. And it's this category in the middle, the business query and the visual discovery. Business query, I think, requires more IT involvement up front. Visual discovery requires less IT involvement, gives more user autonomy, but it's a lighter color here because it requires less skills to set it up and to create good explorations. So some questions that I'd like to go ahead and pose to Tableau. Eric, do you start to moderate this, or can I just dive right in?
You just dive right in.
Okay. So Suzanne, I'd like to go back to a couple things that you mentioned in your introductory portion. So one thing I might have misheard, but did you say that Tableau is growing $58 million in revenues in the past few quarters?
Yeah, in the past couple of quarters. We just recently had an open house looking for new employees here in Seattle, and Christian revealed that over the past 2 quarters we've done $58 million in revenue.
Okay, so that is a staggering growth rate because for all of 2010, you were just at about $36 million. So,
correct.
Yeah, so that is, I've seen different people that track growth, and I always get twitchy when a vendor says we are the only, or the fastest or best or something, but I think it is true. You are the fastest growing vendor, and I think I can confirm you are the only one to have an Academy Award winner on your board.
Yeah, I think that's sort of a stellar accomplishment in of itself. But
yeah.
You know, your question is interesting too. It's poised interestingly. It says, is it all about the pretty pictures or, you know, user autonomy? What do they say, that 78% of people who learn visually? So when represented with a spreadsheet of numbers to pick out trends or to pick out specific numbers, we have to read each cell sequentially, where a picture actually brings the representation of what the number is trying to convey to you immediately, so that you're already on to your next question, and your brain has registered what the result was based on either the color or the distribution of the arrangement, whether it's a bar chart or an area chart or something like that, so that you can quickly move through iteratively through the data. And the concept of the fact that you're actually looking at numbers, but they're just hidden behind, quote unquote, a pretty picture, becomes the material relevance to why data visualization is so important in terms of decision making today.
Right. So to expand on that, what do you think is primarily driving Tableau's growth? Is it the visual, the pretty pictures, the cognitive part of Tableau, or is it this user autonomy?
I think it's the fact that the technology gets out of the way of the user, and the user is as close to the data as they possibly can get. As Brett, you know, confirmed, as he was working with the data, he literally did not touch the keyboard. His hand was on the mouse, he was dragging and dropping, he was double-clicking. You don't need to think about the technology, so you don't have interference. You recognize the data, and the best practices of how to represent that data are intuitive within the technology. And it's the actual interaction with the data and yes, if you want to say it's the autonomy of the user, if you give the user an amount of data that's contextual to the decision making. In other words, we can look at the entire United States, but what we were really interested in were specific counties within Washington State. So we shed the rest of the data, quickly got down to the data that mattered, and start iterating through that data to uncover those anomalies or those outliers which were more meaningful to whatever decision we were trying to make.
Right. And then when Brett was talking about the architecture, so in memory, Eric is saying big data is the hottest category, but within that I'd say it's in memory. and there's a lot of vendors coming out with in-memory capabilities. You showed accessing, actually, Microsoft Power Pivot. I understand that you also now support HANA, SAP HANA. So the fact that you have your own in-memory engine but also can access the data, is this helping you or hurting you? What's the story there?
So it's a tremendous advantage for Tableau, and most importantly for Tableau customers, that there are other architectures. Your slides, for example, coming up in a couple of questions mentions ClickTech. There's some things that they do well, but one of their constraints is that it's only in memory. And we have customers like eBay, like Walmart, that are members of the so-called petabyte club. And if you have a petabyte-sized database, you want to connect to data where it lives. That's a lot of data to try to move around. On the other hand, there are exploratory data where it really does help for it to be in memory. So for example, I was this week looking at some Twitter data that's about 90 million rows. The file size is about 100 gigabytes. Not a huge data set, but had relatively slow data connection. So I was connecting to a Greenplum database that was behind a jump server on the East Coast. And so I brought that data as an extract into memory. And the advantage of doing that is then it's instantaneous. And so there are things related to big data of, if it's a fast database and there's a huge data store, you may just want to connect to it live. Also, the benefit of live is that when that data changes, it automatically is reflected in our visuals. So eBay doing e-commerce, that when something is sold, obviously someone else can't buy it. And so doing a data extract just creates a separate silo data mart. Doesn't make sense. But for my Twitter data, I really wasn't interested so much in what was being tweeted that moment, but I wanted to do exploratory analysis. So getting everything in one place where it was instantaneous was a significant benefit. So that I would highly recommend for the audience, for any architecture you look at, you want that ability to either work with data where it lives today in its existing format, whether it's relational, Hadoop, HANA, etc., or the ability to bring it into memory for the fastest interaction, and the ability to blend data. So another thing that we do as a read-only database is we're not mucking with your definitions of your relational database. You can bring it in and be able to combine a data sets to exploratory analysis and report back to your executives, your colleagues, and do that data blending in a way that is not impacting your source database systems.
So with that, that's a good point, that it's for performance if you don't need the live access. So with your new Hadoop and Hive integration, is that the scenario that you're envisioning customers using it, is that they'll take that Hadoop data and store it in your own in-memory engine, or are you suggesting querying Hive and Hadoop in real time?
You can do either. One reason that we worked with Cloudera for our initial Hive connector, and have just announced a connector with a second partner in the Hadoop space, MapR, is by having a direct connector that is supported by Tableau and our partners, it is faster than doing a standard ODBC, JDBC connection, and it's also optimized so that it's faster than if you were just downloading Hive from the Apache website. And so that Hadoop is not a real-time data store. It's not designed for that. And so that if someone really wants to have interactive play, discovery, like we showed in today's demo, an extract would work well. However, there are quite a few use cases where eBay, being an example customer I mentioned, that they have a lot of data in Hadoop, and a query where you're just looking for a slice of that data makes vastly more sense than trying to bring it into memory. And so our connectors are designed to give the organization and its users the option of whether to go in memory or through a live data connection, or takes a middle ground where you are extracting out a subset of data.
Okay, thank you. And then as you mentioned, one of your competitors, ClickTech, using an in-memory engine. Who would you say is your main competitor? Is it only ClickTech, or would you throw in Spotfire? The big BI platform vendors have all had major new releases this year, or is it really just the analyst sitting there alone with their spreadsheet today?
So, you know, Cindy, that's a great question. I think historically the data discovery grouping was ClickTech, Spotfire, and Tableau. Those were the three companies that one normally, I think it was actually Gartner who originally sort of segmented them off from traditional BI vendors. And I think as more of the major vendors, the Cognos, the Business Objects of the world, MicroStrategy, come in with a data visualization component to their software, that category of data discovery becomes sort of muddled, and maybe visualization or visual data discovery becomes more important. I think what typifies all of us and where we're going is that iterative interaction with the data. This is what we're really getting at. It's the point where data that's represented to the end user is no longer static. It is now fully interactive and gives the capability for anybody to parameterize a series of reports or dashboards that they deliver. The context of how they deliver that, I think, changes the paradigm for who a customer would compare to come out with the proper solution for their organization. I think you need to go through a checklist and define how important static enterprise reporting is to the organization. What level of IT involvement do you want to have? What's your level of interaction with the data? Is it live or is it an extract? That will help you actually determine who should be in your evaluation pool for end product usage. Now we find, as I said before, we find a lot of companies who use us in conjunction with whatever BI tool they currently have or whatever reporting tool they currently have. We even find companies that have ClickTech in one division, Spotfire in another, and Tableau in a third, and it just depends on you know, the preferences of the individuals using the technology. But categorically, I'd say, you know, we're friends to everyone. We specifically are more friendly with the majors because of the fact we go live against all of the appliance vendors and all of the big data vendors. We're certainly in partnership with all of them, and maybe less so with some of the other data visualization vendors. But, you know, in a short list, someone's going to come up with vendors that they're comparing. They're going to look at cost of deployment, so total cost of ownership. They're going to look on the return on investment and the capacity for that technology to drive pervasively BI into the depths of their organization. Tableau is going to stand out in front. Then we'll have the other data visualization vendors, and then we'll have the more traditional BI vendors, just from the cost factor.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll end with one last question before passing it back to Eric. So as we're only partway through the Olympics and you have Tableau Public, are there some viral marketing apps up there where we can track medals with the Olympiads or anything? Anything in Tableau Public?
Absolutely. Yeah? Absolutely. If you go up to Tableau Public, I think there are several organizations in multiple languages who are reporting on the Olympics. I know that we've got someone in Brazil tracking the Latin American wins. We've got the Nordic countries who are tracking it out of Sweden. We've got the Guardian tracking it out of the UK. So yes, there are several, and there's a lot of comparative analysis going on behind the scenes, not just the medals, but I think some of the statistical timing that have gone behind the training of the individual athletes as well.
Okay, good. Suzanne, Brett, thank you. I'll turn it back to Eric for questions from the audience.
Thanks,
all right,
Cindy.
Good deal, and good questions there. We got a bunch of good ones from the audience. Let me just dive right in here. You kind of talked about this a little bit, but can you give some more detail on connections to big data like Hadoop or any of the other NoSQL stores? How does all that work?
So as we showed on the demo, we have the Cloudera Hive connector today. We just announced a connector with MapR for those who are using the MapR distribution of Hadoop. We regularly talk with companies and are planning new connectors. And so within the NoSQL space, we do not have ones that are built into Tableau 7 today, but keep an eye there because we're talking with those companies, and based on requests from our customers and business partners, that you'll be seeing those in the coming years from us. But as Suzanne mentioned, we take a Switzerland approach to working with partners that where the data lives today, that we want to be able to enable that connection to it. And that extends from relational databases to the newer options such as Hadoop or the so-called NewSQL or NoSQL databases.
Gotcha. And the database that's in memory that sits underneath right now, can you talk about that? It is a columnar database, right?
It is, and that goes back to the BizQL technology from Stanford University. And it's a columnar database that's optimized for visual analytics. And it's behind the covers, and so it's neat that it's there because it enables that drag and drop visualization. But for most organizations, it's not something that they spend a lot of time on because it's a dedicated database for Tableau. We're not a vendor such as a company like EMC Greenplum or HP Vertica that are selling a general database technology. That ours is specific to visual analytics and is specific to Tableau Desktop and Tableau Public.
Okay, here's maybe a slightly more difficult question. When you say it's optimized for data visualization, what does that actually mean?
So what I was showing in the demo, for example, for Washington State, where we took a data set, connected to it, and if you recall from the demo, it automatically populated a set of data that showed by geography whether there were smokers there, graduation rates. And when I dragged and dropped onto the canvas, and that map was instantaneous. And that's something that, there can be data sets with millions or records or more, and it gives you that type of rapid response time. And more importantly, there's also a lot of intelligence built in that really goes back to that BizQL database, because what Tableau is able to do is look for relationships between data. So it recognizes, for example, what's geographic data and suggests a visual output. And you can, adjust that as you'd like. You may say, oh, I'm going to try some different, visual examples. But there's a lot of intelligence that speeds up. And so, when I was a data analyst at Gartner Group and prior to that at Department of Defense, there was nothing there that I could just double click on to show on a map and learn things from the data. That I was building this in Excel, and more importantly than just building it in a spreadsheet, I was creating graphs that I learned from, but it was nowhere near that drag and drop or double click ability to see the data. And that goes back to under the covers, the proprietary database that comes with all of the Tableau products.
Gotcha.
Does that answer your question, Eric?
It sure does, yeah. Here's another good question. Is Tableau deployed or deployable on some of the cloud market leaders with their infrastructure, like Azure, for example, or some of this platform as a service stuff? Are you out there already?
We're not out there yet. I think Tableau has the largest cloud deployment with Tableau Public, which is our own hosted environment, and that you'll see more from a SaaS perspective with Tableau moving forward. But moving into somebody else's cloud, I don't know that that's necessarily a path we're going to take. We have plenty of organizations that have their own cloud deployments of Tableau today. They've got in-house cloud, so to speak, and I mean, if we're someone to put it out on the cloud, that would be something that they could do on their own, but it's not something that we're doing per se.
Okay, no worries. Okay. And I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll throw it out there. One of the attendees notes the data you were showing in your demo is aggregated. Can you get to a detailed level of data on a particular point? I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. It's just what
Absolutely.
you bring into the system, right?
Right. Yeah, we can go all the way down to the leaf level or the individual transaction of the data. Whatever data is available to us, you have complete drill down capability to the lowest level of detail that's there.
Okay, that's
If you
great.
recall from the demo where I clicked on, there's a little infographic sign and pulled up the underlying data so that you can, take, and just from that data set, go from a nationwide view of all of this data and drill down to an individual county. And you can do the same for a data set such as an e-commerce site where if you want to drill down to an individual user, an individual transaction, you're able to do that.
Okay, good. And you kind of talked about this just a minute ago, but it's a really good question I'll throw out. One of these attendees asked, does Tableau use Bing Maps API, the Google Maps API, or others? Can the Maps API be selected by the user depending on the look and feel the user wants?
So answer all of the above. And so we embed maps within Tableau, but you can connect to a variety of external, map sites. And so the reason that we embed is that it enables you to drag and drop immediately.
Yep.
What we don't do is put, down to the square inch level the entire global map, because for new users who go to the Tableau site and say, that looks great, I want to download a trial of Tableau Desktop, it would be quite a large file to do, like, all of that. And so that we, that's where, someone can connect to whether it's our embedded maps to get granular detail or connect to, any of the map sources that they would like.
Gotcha. Good, good, good. Now another attendee writes, from a GRC standpoint, governance, risk, and compliance, how is data and report access addressed? You talked about this a bit, and the question goes on, is it simple LDAP, Active Directory, or a more complete solution where you can use your security plus third-party security? How does all that work?
So it's similar answers to the previous question of, all of the above. And so what many organizations will do with Tableau Server is they'll start off by using, for example, LDAP security and connect to Microsoft Active Directory. You can add to that multiple layers of authentication. I mentioned that we have customers who are in the federal government, in the intelligence agencies. You imagine that, they secure data pretty well, and there are a variety of things that they put on top of that. Likewise, we have customers who are, buying an individual copy of desktop and are then publishing it, that they can, may just use an Active Directory server. So there are, and I would say the last point to mention is that when you connect to a database, that you're leveraging all the database security that's already built in there. So the authentication that we required if you connect to an EMC Greenplum database, all the same layers of authentication and authorization are required for that database access.
Okay, good. And here's a really good question. One of the attendees writes, designing a good visual representation is so much different than traditional management reporting in tabular form with graphs. What skills should one look for in a new hire who would get how to do that kind of thing?
So it's a great question, and our software is really designed for any knowledge worker. And the way I would phrase it is thinking about so-called T-shaped people, where the top part of that T are general kind of business skills, being able to collaborate with colleagues, and that bottom part of the T is where they have drilled down expertise and being able to think creatively about data. But the nice thing about our software is that the learning curve is quite short, and so that we have people in school systems, for example. Here in Washington State, there's a high school that's been able to dramatically raise their graduation rates over the last couple of years using Tableau, and these are school administrators and teachers who use Tableau. And it's wonderful when Christian, our CEO, went into the school and talked to the teachers, that you have people who are nowhere near a data analyst or data scientist in their title been able to learn about and use Tableau. But I think it's a great question about skill sets, and I would encourage hiring those so-called T-shaped people who have general cross-business collaboration skills with drill down technical expertise.
Okay, good. And one attendee asks about Google BigQuery. Do you have any kind of a connector to that already?
Not pre-built in. It's a good question. That there's a lot of great innovation coming out of Google. Not just the inspiration for Hadoop, but we do not have any direct connector for Google BigQuery other than our standard ODBC driver.
Okay, and what about SAS and SPSS? Do you have any custom connectors for those tools?
Not to date. We do have quite a few customers who use Tableau with the SAS or SPSS environment, and that it's certainly on our radar, but it's not something that we have published to date, a dedicated IBM SPSS or SAS connector.
Okay, good. Well, folks, we have burned through an hour and 7 minutes here. A lot of great questions from our audience. Thank you so much for all of those. Big thank you to our friends from Tableau Software for stepping into the briefing room once again. Very big thank you to Cindi Howson for all of her great questions. We do archive all of these webcasts for later viewing, so you can check them out anytime. Analytics is the topic of August. Next month is integration, then database, then cloud, and then innovators is once again in December, so keep your eyes and ears peeled for all that. This does conclude our webcast for today, folks, but once again I say hop online to InsideAnalysis.com for all the latest and see what's coming up in the near future. And with that, we will bid you farewell, and speakers, stick around for just a minute, and we'll have a quick post-conference. And with that, we'll say thanks again, folks, for attending another episode of the Briefing Room. Take care. Bye-bye.